For 2 decades, I've seen the same set of bad KPI habits, unfortunately, become common KPI practice. Now, these bad KPI habits cause most of our struggles to meaningfully measure performance. We reap what we sow, and that's why it can be a really useful exercise to see if you do have any bad KPI habits and instead practice some better ones. Bad KPI habit number 1 is brainstorming to come up with KPIs. When you brainstorm KPIs, you end up with too many, not enough, things that aren't really KPIs and a very shallow understanding of exactly how you'll measure them. Instead, you need to design KPIs very deliberately so they are convincing evidence of the goal or result that you want to measure. Bad KPI habit number 2 is measuring because you can or because you already are. The reason to measure something isn't that you have the data and can measure it easily. The reason to measure is that you need to know something very specific about how well or to what degree you're achieving a particular goal or performance result. So only measure what you should, can, and will do something about. Bad KPI habit number 3 is trying to measure effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, sustainability, you know the things. Embarking on the task, for example, of finding the right KPI to measure effectiveness, it will be a frustrating journey into weasel world. And that's the place where words lack meaning or mean 17 different things to 5 different people. Don't try measuring any goal or performance result that is written with weasel words until you talk about what those words specifically mean in the real world. Bad KPI habit number 4 is saying, that's not measurable. If you think a performance result or goal isn't measurable, then there is a really good chance it also isn't observable. And if you can't observe in the real world whether or not a goal's been reached, you don't have a goal. Goals are about changing the world in some way, and if you can't define that change in observable and measurable ways, your goals really need more work before you should even bother thinking about measures. Bad KPI habit number 5 is not measuring something because you don't have the data. How will you ever get the data you really need, the data about the goals and performance results that really matter most, if you keep refusing to measure something just because the data doesn't already exist? When you separate the act of designing the right measures from the act of deciding how feasible those measures are to implement, you give yourself the chance to really see that often the data is easier to get than you first thought, or at least it's worth the effort to get. Bad KPI habit number 6 is setting milestones as KPIs. Now, milestones are statements about having completed something by a particular time. They're very appropriate in project management, but they're next to useless in performance management. Just getting something done is never evidence that it produced the desired result, that performance is improving. Our KPIs should monitor results, not actions. Bad KPI habit number 7 is measuring to monitor people's performance rather than process performance. Now, more people complain about being measured than rejoice. And it's either because the measurement is being done poorly or the real purpose of measurement is poorly understood. Now, until you have a culture where performance measures are used to improve performance without blame, and using measures to improve process performance is a great way to establish this culture, by the way, measuring people will always cause more problems than it solves. Bad KPI habit number 8 is measuring too many things. If you have too much of anything, it overwhelms you. Too many things to do and you're exhausted and don't do any of them particularly well. Too much to think or worry about and you're stressed and emotionally burned out. Too many KPIs or performance measures, and your attention is fractured, and no area of performance will improve significantly, at least, if at all. So once more, only measure what you should, can, and will do something about. Bad KPI habit number 9 is ignoring measures that aren't perfect. Now, while it is important that your KPIs don't mislead you, most people tend to err on the side of caution and not use any measures that are based on data that isn't perfect, or measures that don't tell the full story. Now, as long as the measures aren't severely biased, their reliability can be far less than perfect and still provide you with actionable information, particularly information about trends or shifts in performance. Now, which of these bad KPI habits got your attention? What if you chose just one and spent the next month replacing it with a better practice instead?